Good morning. Thank you all for joining us for this two-part series in how to help your child through home learning. As it looks like schools are more likely to stay closed for longer, we really understand the challenges that parents are facing. Listening to Radio 4 this morning, it feels that this third lockdown is proving harder and much more overwhelming than the first. We hope, therefore, this 45-minute webinar will leave you feeling more confident and reassured that you really are doing everything you can, and will help you understand how your child learns best and what strategies you can use to help keep yourself and your child motivated. As a brief introduction, my name is Harry Cobb. I'm a director at Bonas MacFarlane, where I manage our team of tutors. It is our integrated approach which helps hundreds of families a year with tuition, assessing students to help them fulfill their potential, and offering families advice to place their children into the most appropriate schools and universities, be that in the UK or the US. To help us answer your questions today, I'm delighted to be joined by James Bonas and James Froome. James Froome began his educational journey as a teaching assistant, working with one-to-one children with a range of learning and behavioural needs. After this, he qualified as a secondary school English teacher through the Teach First programme. Since then, he has worked as a tutor with Bonas MacFarlane and is simultaneously studying a master's in educational leadership at UCL. Beyond tutoring, he enjoys leading on the Duke of Edinburgh programmes, climbing Himalayan mountains, and has cycled over 20,000 kilometres through Asia and Africa. James Bonas is one of our leading assessors and is one of the company's founding tutors. Having graduated from Oxford with a degree in psychology, James has been tutoring since the early 90s and has supported numerous students achieve success. When we are not in the middle of a pandemic, James is a professional theatre and opera director. Thank you both for joining us today. Before we begin, the format of the talk will start with a brief presentation from James Froome, and then will be followed by a Q&A. We would like to hear from as many people as possible, so please do use the Q&A box to answer or ask, any questions that you may have. Many of you have already submitted questions, so we will do our best to answer these as well, so thank you. I guess for the purposes of this meeting, I will be the male equivalent of Fiona Bruce, and I look forward to hearing from James. So I will pass you over to Mr. Froome.
Thanks very much, Harry. I'm assuming you can see my screen okay. So this brief talk, 10-15-minute talk, is going to be on how do we support learning in a homeschooling environment. The first thing to say is children and human beings in general are incredibly complicated, varied. Everyone is unique. And so to do this effectively, we need to keep things incredibly simple until you're really confident that you're doing this well, and then you can make it slightly more complicated. But simplicity is the key here. So at this point, I want to highlight three beliefs I have. Number one, the significant majority of children can make phenomenal progress at school and be very happy. I've seen children change 3 grades in the space of a year when targeted effort has been implemented. Whether those children are from very low income families, whether they have mental health problems, with the right support, they can make significant progress and achieve very high things. Number two, some children are more complex and challenging than others. Each child needs to be judged on a case-by-case basis, and if they are more complicated, they will need more effort. Number three, parents are the biggest lever in facilitating or restricting change. So the first thing we need to think about is, what is learning? Is it what the school curriculum puts in front of you? Is it maths, English, science? Is learning extracurricular activities? So chess, coding, sports, meditation. Is learning the soft skills or character skills? Independence, resilience, courage, bravery, kindness. What does learning mean to you as a parent? Is it one of these dimensions, two of these dimensions, or a combination of all three? I can assure you that in schools, the emphasis is on the school curriculum. And therefore, it may be an opportunity right now to develop the extracurricular and the personality traits of your children or child. So, the most important part of long-term learning is your child's attitude and character skills. So you may be asking yourself, why an iceberg? Well, what we see on top of the iceberg is what we see in day-to-day life. Underneath the iceberg is the child's mind, the bottom half of the iceberg, and this is the most important part of a child's educational journey. If you don't address the mind and how they think, the learning will not flourish. And if it does, it will be dependent on the school system, in which case you will find when they go to university and you remove all the support structures, they really struggle. So addressing the soft skills, what I call independence, growth mindset, courage, bravery, kindness, teamwork, all those underlying skills is incredibly important and is often neglected at school. So in my opinion, the most important is growth mindset. And it was a term coined by Carol Dweck, who's a psychologist. She's written a brilliant book on it. And what does this mean? Growth mindset means that through hard work, a child will believe that through hard work, they can achieve anything. So effort equals success rather than intelligence equals success. So it's incredibly important this is your child's attitude to learning. So this is the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And I encourage you to read this brief quote from the book. Okay. So beyond that, how do I motivate my child at home? So this is a school of thought introduced to me by a man called Simon Sinek, who encourages you to start with the why. So when you're talking with your children, always start with the why it's important. Connect with them on their individual level, why it's important that they're learning. Then talk about how are they going to do the learning, and then talk about what specifically they're going to do to achieve the learning. That's one way of thinking about it. A second way of thinking is from a thinker called Daniel Pink, who wrote a book called Drive. He emphasizes three things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy is making the child feel free and independent, not controlling them, not micromanaging them, giving them the freedom and responsibility to fly on their own. It's really important. Secondly, mastery. So the child needs to feel like they're learning. So if you're doing too many things, they're not going to make that much progress. They're going to be spreading their wings too far in too many different pies. You need to focus on a few things and encourage mastery in those few things, and that will build up their confidence. And then you can move on to other territory. And then the third thing is purpose, and this connects with the why. You have to create a narrative around purpose, around why they're doing what they're doing, instead of you just need to be working hard because school demands it. It needs to be deeper than that. And the third school of thinking I connect with is, as mentioned previously, Carol Dweck and the growth mindset, and building this in your children or child. So again, the most important thing you do before making a plan is determining what your child's learning objectives are. So is it school, the school curriculum? Is it the extracurricular activities? Is it on their personality traits, or is it on a combination of all three? So a nice way of thinking about leadership is to split leadership into what I call the life world and the systems world. So the life world is connecting and leading your child on an emotional level, on a heart-to-heart level. The systems world is leading them through systems, planning, effective administration. Most business leaders as well will lead their companies through these techniques. You can do different ratios. So if you're more of a heart-to-heart leader, you can put 70% of the emphasis on that and 30% on the systems world. If you're more of a planner, you're better at creating systems, you can do 90% on that and 10% on the heart and heart. It depends on who you are as a parent, but a combination of these two dimensions needs to happen for effective leadership. So the life world, how do we do this? Well, connecting with your child on an emotional level means doing what they like to do with them. So if they love Fortnite, I hate to say it, you need to play Fortnite with them. Doesn't need to be the whole time, but you need to understand the game and connect with them and be able to talk about it with them. You need to listen and empathize, because otherwise, how can we expect them to empathize and listen to us? The second part of this for me is being a role model. So if you're asking them to not use their phone at night and not spend 5 hours a day on their phone, you need to be setting that example. If you want them to have no screen time after 9 p.m, well, you need to do that as well. Otherwise, it's going to be really confusing and it's going to build resentment, and it's going to lead to a breakdown of respect and communication, from my experience. Systems world is, for some people, easier, for some people, harder. It takes as much work. So the systems world, and I'm going to move on the next slide to this. The systems world revolves around your objectives. So the systems world, you need to create what we call SMART targets. And I'll show these again on the next slide, what these can look like. But they need to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. If you don't create targets that are clear and accountable, the whole process will break down. So you can look at how to create smart targets on YouTube in a 5-minute video. They're really simple, but to create an effective outcome, you have to have an effective target. If your child is not achieving what you expect them to achieve, it's probably because your systems are wrong. In the schools I've worked in, you can have the most difficult children you can imagine can be tamed to achieve the targets you want through clarity and consistency. So there's really no excuses. In my mind, it all comes down to how effectively as a parent you are setting the targets. And I would really encourage you to look to yourselves for this and not blame it on the child, because children don't know about this. They can't see the bigger picture. If we take responsibility as parents and improve our target setting and holding children accountable, it will lead to progress with time. So, and I'm going to show you about this in the next slide. What's also important is that everyone is staying calm. This shouldn't create stress. So you as parents should be calm and the child should be calm. And it should not feel like it's taking up too much of your time. You should not feel like you're micromanaging them. It should only, all this target setting, all this systems world should only take up a small amount of your day. So how do we set these targets? Well, firstly, you need to create these targets as a team. So everyone needs to be on the same playing field. So if it's mum and dad need to sit down with child number A and create the plan together. If mum and dad are not on the same expectations and not consistent, most children will manipulate the situation, subconsciously or consciously. So mum and dad need to be exactly on the same wavelength. If it's just a single parent, then it's more work for you. And in many ways, it's much harder, but it's much simpler in terms of consistency. So number one, you need to have a clear vision together. Mum, dad, or mum or dad with the child. You then create targets, which are SMART targets. So, and these can be just school-based, they can be extracurricular-based, or they can be around soft skills or personality-based. And I invite you to have a quick look at some of these targets. If you can find any holes in them, we can discuss them later, I'm sure. I could improve my SMART targets here. So first you plan the objectives as a team. Then the child will do them. The child should be doing these by themselves. You shouldn't need to help them, really. If you are needing to help them, so depending on the child's learning difficulty, if they have learning difficulties, you will need to help them more. If they are at a younger age, you will need to help them a bit more. But as much as possible, I encourage you to have the attitude that through struggle, through failure, they will learn by themselves to do this. And it might mean for the first few weeks, they have a number of meltdowns and they say, I can't do this. And they throw a brick through the window, all of which I've seen. They'll throw books at you, they'll try and punch you, you know, all of this stuff can happen. But if you just stick to your systems and believe that with a bit of time, their minds will recondition and kind of reprogram into this new way of life, it will change. I've worked in a number of turnaround schools where you would go into the school and there would be fights every day, everywhere. And, you know, children would come into a teacher's room and flip their table upside down. And in 6 months, with consistency and an incredible systems world, the school would be an oasis of peace. So it does take a bit of time, but it will happen. So this brings me on to rewards and sanctions. These are tricky. Always start with the with connecting with your child on an emotional level before you do the rewards and sanctions. But having rewards and sanctions is important as a backup. If they're achieving the expectations, they should have freedom. They can do what they want. They can go on Fortnite for 5 hours if that's the setup you've created. You shouldn't be micromanaging how many kind of hours they have on Fortnite if you've created an effective plan with your expectations. On the flip side, if they're not achieving your expectations, in my mind, every privilege should go. You shouldn't be cooking for them. You shouldn't be giving them any tech or Wi-Fi. You shouldn't be cleaning and making up their room. If they're not achieving your expectations, what kind of message is it giving if mummy or daddy is still cleaning my room and cooking 3 meals a day for me and allowing me to have an hour of my favorite Netflix show? It's not going to achieve the results you want. Finally, these are some resources you can access if you want to put the time in. Most of these ideas are on YouTube in 5-minute talks. And so if you want to learn about them quickly, that's the best way to do it. And finally, if you're still having problems, email the teachers at school for further resources. Or if you need a bit of extra help, get a tutor in for a few sessions, just like with a personal trainer in a gym. Get a tutor in, do it together for a few sessions, and then you can get on with it by yourself as a family.
Thank you very much, James. That was extremely informative, and hopefully some of that theory will help parents kind of help better structure the days at home. I hope you find that informative, and obviously if you'd like that presentation, we'll send it to you after this talk. I think now probably leads us a good time to answer and go through the questions, some of which have been pre-sent. So I guess, listening to that talk, James, it's very interesting and the theory is helpful, but how is it actually going to work in reality? Certainly time is not a parent's best friend at the moment, especially when they're having to manage maybe multiple children as well as their home, working at home as themselves. So James, Bonas, I guess perhaps a popular question that's been coming in is how much should we try to mimic the school day in terms of what the school is asking them to do, and then what the parents are asking them to do at home?
I think it's really, the whole thing, it's really, really hard. I think one of the first things to say is that to try to take any self-blame out of this, I think it's really difficult for everyone. It's difficult for the schools, it's difficult for the parents, and it's tricky for the kids. And therefore, you don't need to feel that you need to replicate school at home. The school is there to do the predominant body of the teaching activities. They actually will still teach your child. You can ask for more assistance in that from the school, and you're there to facilitate that maybe in the best way that you can. But I guess in a way, it sounds a bit stupid this, but I mean it. The first thing you all need to do is forgive yourselves for the mess you're going to make. You kind of go, it's fine, we're going to make a mess. But then in a way, with the growth mindset that James was talking about, then persist. So given that this is the situation, given that there's a period of time, it may till after half term, if you've got primary school kids, it may be to the summer term, or you may have kids come out for exams. I've got nephews coming up into GCSEs, is to work together with your child. That's the first thing I'd say, is that you are together in a situation with your kid, which is this situation of trying to learn at home at distance. And therefore, together, you make a plan about how to cope with that. And therefore, to get to your point, Harry, you should be realistic. I've worked in families, the family itself lives in quite a chaotic state. And therefore, that's quite a challenging thing to ask that family to produce. If you've got some parents who themselves probably function perfectly well in a systems-led normal world where they've got work interposing structure on them, they're at home too. You've got to find out the way that together you can build a framework for the day that can function for you as a family. And that may work by following the school's timetable patterning, or it may be that you've got rhythms that are different. If you've got a kid with any sort of attention deficit issues, or a kid that maybe just needs to move more than another kid to get outside, then stuff it. Yeah, they maybe need to be online for the lesson content that they get from the teacher, but then give them 20 minutes off, let them go and run around. Find the way or the rhythm that suits your family better. And if that means that you change the school day hours, if it means that you need to, if you've got a kid who actually prefers to do some work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, do it then. I think be online for what you need, but then try to make a system that fits your family and your rhythms whilst remaining consistent. The catastrophe is inconsistency. So whatever it is you develop with your child so they have a sense of ownership of it, and then stick to it. That's what I'd say. So going through sort of endless changing patterns will cause complete chaos for everyone. So I think sit together, try to find a pattern that's going to suit you as a family unit, and that can cope. Particularly, my brother has 4 children under the age of 9, and they're trying to homeschool all of them at once. So that's a really complex set of parameters to try and balance. But if you work together as a family, and again, I've been seeing things in the papers the last few days about how much of the burden of this is falling upon the mothers at the moment. And that's, I'm sure, not true in every family, but as a general rule, it often is. I think try and balance that out. You've got to find a way that actually, if it's one parent that's doing most of that heavy lifting, you know, my brother's a lawyer, so maybe he's most of the day in law, but then find a thing so he's doing activities with the kids at the end of the day or before the start of the day, that any planning is done together, not as one parent with a kid, but as a unit. You talk together about what you're trying to overcome as the problems, and then accept that, yeah, it isn't going to be easy. I'm sorry, it's a really hard thing to do, but it's about doing the best you can and learning about how to make a way forwards together as a group. That could have very positive outcomes.
Good answer. Thank you very much. I think just to expand on it as well, the way that I've seen students and families really progress is by the student taking ownership and having a conversation as a family about what they're going to achieve in a day. And then at the end of the day, having some self-reflection, kind of looking at what went well, even better if, what we might do tomorrow to improve on what we learned today. And just the more communication you have between student and parent is very beneficial. So we actually have some a live question that's come in from Bisela. So maybe I'll direct this at you, James Froome. How do you address self-motivation for the child? How do you get them to pick up a book to read without asking them to? And then she's also asked, how do you encourage the child to be more competitive with regards to achieving high grades, etc., with online assessments? Some practical examples, please, if you could.
Okay, I'll start with the first one, self-motivation. I mean, the mind it's a lot harder to create self-motivation and intrinsic motivation than extrinsic motivation, because it takes time to change the brain. From my experience, a big thing that helped, as Daniel Pink talks about in his line of thinking, a child feeling like they're good at something is a really good place to start. So giving them a specialism, whether that's outside the curriculum or inside the formal curriculum, them having a something they are a master at is an anchor point to build that confidence off. So if your child loves Fortnite and they're amazing at it, maybe say, look how good you've got at Fortnite. I really believe if you put that time and energy into maths, you would see similar results. Or if they're really amazing at playing chess, just having something, and then you can kind of build outwards from there. You can create a kind of narrative where, okay, well, you're really good at chess and Fortnite now. Like, look what you do when you put time and effort in. You can do it with maths, or you can do it with English, or you can do it with also, I found from my experience, it's a rare child that is intrinsically driven to succeed at school. There's plenty of children who are that way, and you're very lucky if you have a child like that, and they'll probably continue sailing their own ship very well. But usually it takes extrinsic measures. It takes a good systems world to facilitate that confidence building and that change. So sometimes you have to force the child to succeed before they start believing in themselves. It's like forcing a car to if a car's run out of battery, you have to force that car through extrinsic measures, and then at some point they might start believing in themselves. I'm sure James can share a different.
No, I think it's really difficult. I think there's a couple of things. One is with regards to the kind of A grade thing. It's a really difficult thing you guys have got to do, which is one of the things that's easy as a tutor is a level of emotional detachment from the child that I'm going to go and work with. I can care about the child's success because I want them to do well, blah, blah, blah. But I am not personally emotionally invested in their learning outcome. I don't project into what I see forwards. And that's really, really hard for you as parents, because you can't not. Because when you sit with a kid and they're being difficult, and oh, I hate maths, I'm not doing maths, you start going, oh my God, he's never going to get a job. He's never going to get a job. It's going to be a disaster. He's going to be like this in the workplace. He'll get fired, or he'll never go to university. And this kind of catastrophic projection goes on very quickly. And it's a lot to ask, but to try to not put that weight onto your kid in the next few months when you're working with them, because you can't really expect them to carry that. So you may want your kid to want to get A grades, but they have to want to in the end. You can't make them want that. You just won't manage it. And actually every kid wants an A grade. In reality, the reason they say they don't, or they don't bother, or they don't try, for the most part, I think when you dig down, is fear. They don't have the confidence. They're afraid of failing. They're afraid that actually they'll put in the effort and it won't work out. They're afraid of looking like geeks in front of their friends because they're a bit cool and they don't want to look like that. There's all these layers of resistance that are actually to do with lack of confidence. And a tricky thing to remember as a parent is sometimes the harder you push, the harder you kind of, no, you need to do this and you have to, what the child hears, not the semantics of what you're saying, but what they receive is that you don't believe in them. Because if you did, you wouldn't need to press like that. So you're reinforcing the fact that they feel that they couldn't achieve it. And therefore, what I'd say is go back to a kind of micro level. In a way, it's what James is saying, is go back to very small, achievable targets where you could sit down with your kid on a particular topic in maths and go, oh my God, I'm really crap at fractions too. Let's you and me solve this together. And together with the child, see if you can find a way through a bit of math that you hate, or excite them about a poem that you love from Sylvia Plath if you're doing GCSEs. So that you try to, with a child, lead them over that first hump of confidence. I think it's a subtle thing, it's a complex thing, but actually just wishing that they want A grade or wishing, you won't manage it. And another way, just quickly, I'd say, his children are people, we create this division where they're sort of a different species. They're really not. They're just not as tall as you. And if they're doing A-levels, they may be taller than you. Think of a thing that you wouldn't like to do. I'm unbelievably crap at chess. I'm just rubbish at it. There's other stuff I'm really good at. I'm rubbish at chess, and I would push away chess. I don't want to play chess. So then what would I have to do to motivate myself to play chess? Does that make any sense? What would I need to do to kind of push past my own barrier? I'm being crap at chess. It's a bit embarrassing, to kind of get myself to want to do it. That's what it's like for your kid if they're not a self-motivated reader or you've got to help. Imagine the thing that you would find it really tough to do. Share that with them. Go, well, yeah, me asking you to read is like me asking myself to play tennis. My sisters used to take the piss out of me when I played tennis. I was so bad. And so that you start to find a way together to address the emotional content of what's making them not want to do it. I think, because I think the aversion to reading or to setting high goals and A grades is to do with the fear of failure and success. And the way our education system is built, sadly, all over the West in a way, is on kind of success failure from very young ages and reward based stuff. And that becomes very, very quickly divisive for children into I'm the one that failed or I succeeded. And trying to get away from that a bit can help.
Thank you. I think that's a very good response to those questions. I think a common question also is, how many hours a day should students be studying? What is achievable for them to complete? I appreciate our audience is very varied, so perhaps Jay, you could focus maybe on primary level students, and James Froome, you could just think about GCSE and A-level students in terms of what is realistic for a student to do in a day.
Primary ones, I mean, again, to be honest, I'd say this across everything. First, be in dialogue with your school and with other parents. I think I want to say that earlier, actually. Don't feel that you're in an isolated you are in a bubble, but see if you can connect with other parents in your kids' school group or in your year group, so you can talk with them about their experiences with that particular set of tasks that the school's asking you to do, because you may find there's a resource there of shared head fry, or this worked for me, or that's helpful. Secondly, if the school is overburdening you, have that conversation with them. Do you know what I mean? I know one of my sisters being asked to do completely insane things this week, including making short films and editing this and this. If it's too much, talk to them. But otherwise, less that is focused, successful, and has a kind of concrete, measurable output, and then is allowed to break out and take time free, is better. The worst is a long period of unfocused, distracted, ineffective learning time, because what the kid then learns is that to work is to procrastinate, or is to let the time. In a way, it's kind of, the school model is unfortunate, because I was really good at school, but still you're sat there in an hour's lesson and 35 minutes of it is really boring, and you sort of wish most of it away. But try to make it as efficient and effective, so when the kid's working, they're working, and then they stop. So for primary, I would look at doing the minimum effective work with the maximum play, getting exercise, whether it's around your hallway and up and down the stairs, or in your kitchen, or in the back garden, so that you've got breaks where the kid's releasing energy and then focusing for a short, focused period. That's what I'd suggest.
Thank you. And James Froome, looking at slightly older pupils.
Yeah, so connecting with Jay's answer, the schools I operated in, you had high expectations were a good thing. I say this with a bit of caution. I tended to teach my students with very high expectations. You have to make your own judgment as a parent. I would again get you to think about what are your objectives first, and then it's as long as it takes. So if the objectives you've agreed together as a team are going to take 10 hours a day, so 50 hours across the week, then those are the objectives you've agreed, and they can do it in their own time. They can have 4 hours in the morning free and then put a 10-hour session in deep into the evening. They need to kind of manage how they're going to do that, especially at secondary level. But there's so much work that's required to do well at secondary school, unfortunately, that they're going to need to put in a lot of hours. But I would say set the objectives together, and then they can do it in their own time, how they want to, on the computer if they want to, but as long as they're achieving them, that's good enough.
Very good. And just kind of maybe expanding on the theme of soft skills, and a popular question that's coming in, how do you help develop those skills, but particularly for students who have maybe completed their work school finishes at 3 o'clock and then they've got free time. How, as parents, can you help explore those soft skills? Jay, do you have a thought on that?
Well, I think, in a way, again, it's either this is either a great luxury or a trial. You've got a chance to have an engagement with your kids that particularly, my God, if they're at boarding school, it's definitely more than it would normally be, but compared to many things or normal timetables, you've got a time to really engage with them and do things together. So what I'd say is do a thing together that involves collaboration in order to achieve it. So a project, making something. I mean, actually, why not actually link up your kid with another family or two more families? I've just been making films, with a dancer I had a dancer in Boston, I had a choreographer in Philadelphia, I was in London, there was someone else. Okay, this is a sort of adult level, but there's no reason you couldn't do a micro version of that with your kids. Do you know what I mean? You could find another kid in a family that they could start making a tune together, a song, they can make up a dance, you could film it. So kind of projects that involve the need for others to complete them is just always a good thing for the soft skills.
James, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say if you're going to focus on one soft skill, it has to be growth mindset. And that kind of idea of a project that Jay talked about is really good, starting from nothing and kind of building towards something and achieving something where you knew nothing before. I think that's a really important journey. I think also there are these small, when I've introduced it to families before, there are these small videos on YouTube where you can introduce the idea of growth mindset. I think the child needs to know what growth mindset is to begin with. And then you can start building some key words into how you speak to the child. So, ask questions like, do you think that's a growth mindset? Or you can kind of have some power words that remind the child to have a growth mindset. I think that's helpful. And then really just encouraging them frequently to do something outside their comfort zone. I think sports is wonderful because it very quickly gets human beings out of their comfort zone. A run immediately gets you from a place of comfort to a place of discomfort. Having a kind of routine where the child regularly, every day, just even for 5 minutes, gets outside their comfort zone. I have a cold shower every day to do that. I'm not encouraging you to do that for your children, but that's, something like that where it's kind of stretching their comfort zone every day is really important. And then talking about it as a family.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to expand as well that, obviously schools are really great places for collaboration and developing those social skills with teachers and your peer group. And obviously that is not possible at the moment. So even if it's very simple things of playing a card game in the evening, playing some board games, all those kind of interactions. And there are a number of word association games, including kind of Trivial Pursuit, Linky, Set, which develop kind of reasoning skills, all really help kind of allow, I guess, students to enjoy working with their parents. I'm slightly conscious of time because we said we'd wrap up in 45 minutes. There is a few questions, James, asking about our assessment, just in terms of, can this happen online, and what does it involve? What does it kind of explore, and what would parents find out about it?
The assessment, yes, totally. It can be done online. The assessment is really a conversation. Would begin with an assessment would be with you and us about what you want the assessment for. So why? What are you trying to discover about the kid? Is it sometimes it's because the child is looking to move school and you're exploring what possible schools might be good for the child. Sometimes it's just to see where your kid's at relative to other kids in the national peer group. Sometimes it could be that there's certain issues or something that you're wanting to look at the way that your child's learning, or to address some of those things. I think first thing is to say that we're not providing, it's not an educational psychologist assessment. It's not that. So it will look at where your kid is in relative to other kids in their peer group, what their learning expectations would be given whatever year group they're in. And it will highlight enough if there's some issues there that we'd go, actually, we think there's something that you need to have another look at. And then we pass you to an educational psychologist to look more if there may be a specific learning difficulty that's causing the problem. That's really important to say. So we would be a sort of first level assessment to maybe pick up on some of those things. And it would involves a really good level of conversation with the kid to try and find out where the kid's at in relationship to school, to the way they learn, to their friends, to their hobbies and expectations towards what they feel their parents' expectations are, that sort of stuff. Then some sort of norm assessment tools, which are not stressful, but are quite fun for the kid to do, that actually the assessor does with them, that will give you some standardized scores on certain ability quotients, which again, all of these things have their own limitations, but they're useful to give a guide on things. And then some further tasks that would help look at where the kid is relative to their peer group in maybe creative writing and some English task comprehension stuff and some maths and maybe a bit of science. But it's to give us a global understanding of where your child is at and also possible routes forwards. It's also quite helpful, I think, it's a difficult thing for kids. There's a whole load of children who might have little learning niggles that are about the way that they particularly process that aren't so marked that the school really notices really fast, but the parents feel it. And it can be quite good at sort of sorting out some of those kids, because it means that the tools we'll use to look at the kid will pick up on some of those things that we can then talk to the school about, or you can talk to the school about, and start to have a look at how to address them, where they might be not so marked that an SEN person has already been called in to help. I think that can be useful in helping those kids, I found.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that. As I said, I'm conscious of time. There have been quite a few questions that have been asked before and during the Q&A, but I will personally respond to those today, so you will get your questions answered. So I guess for now, I'd like to thank James and James for contributing to the panel. And I'd also like to remind you that this is a two-part series, and that next week, at the same time at 10:30 on the 2nd of February, I'm delighted to say that we'll be joined by Fintan O'Regan, who is one of the leading behaviour and learning specialists, and he will be joined by Will Petty, my colleague, who will be chairing it. So until next week, good luck, and as I said, any questions, please do contact us directly, and we'd be delighted to help.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.